Republican race is heating up as Newt Gingrich has grabbed the lead for the nomination. Will he essentially be the one who faces Obama in 2012 elections? And the stunning death of North Korean leader Kim Jong-Il. What lies ahead for the future of that country? Here, as he's always been throughout the year, to tell us more is attorney, professor from SUNY Maritime, and political analyst Mark Meirowitz to answer these questions and much more. Welcome, Mark.
Hello, Sylvia.
How are you doing?
Great.
So we're discussing, time has made 2011 the year of the protester. Can you take us through how we got here and what's next?
Well, we've had a lot of interesting protests this year. We've had Occupy Wall Street, of course, and we've also had Occupy many cities and domestically, and then around the world we've had the Arab Spring, rising protests. We've even had protests in Russia and in China. So it's spreading all over the world. What does it all mean? And we were speaking before, and you mentioned the Time magazine has indicated the person of the year is the protester. That's very interesting. But the question is, where does it all go, and where does it all lead? Is it just turbulence and chaos, or is there actually something concrete that will come out of it?
Well, you see countries like Morocco, the Arab Spring has brought about a new constitutional change and a new constitutional vision. But in other countries, they're still fighting, like in Syria.
Well, even with Morocco and with Tunisia and with some of the countries that are not erupting in chaos where the soldiers are killing the people, as in Syria and Egypt, I think that just having a constitution is not sufficient. Having a piece of paper does not change society. Society has to change in its entirety, and there have to be institutions that are democratic in nature that can build a society towards freedom. And the problem that you have in Egypt in particular is that the euphoria of Tahrir Square has now degenerated into a bloody battle on the streets, including attacking women on the streets, and there's been a big demonstration of thousands of women claiming that the army is persecuting and attacking women on the street. The thing is degenerating. And what you end up with in Egypt is a mortal battle between the military and the Muslim Brotherhood, and the potentiality likely that the Muslim Brotherhood will take power. That changes the whole face and the whole shape of the Middle East. In Syria, all bets are really unknown. We really don't know. Right now, the military has the upper hand, and it looks like they're going to work out some sort of a solution because Russia has stepped in, Iran has stepped in. There are a lot of other bigger chess players on this board than just Syria. And we don't want this to degenerate into a major conflagration and war in the Middle East. The potential is there that if this continues and these regimes degenerate, you'll have another Middle East war, which will not be a good thing for anybody, and certainly not for those people that are just striving for freedom. They just want to have a decent life. And the problem is they're the ones that are going to be the losers. So the point about the protester is the protester is a very nice image, but to what end? Where does it go? What do you get concretely at the end of the day? And that's where I think it would have been better to put on Time a big question mark, because the protester, so now what? And it's almost like that movie, The Candidate, when I think it was Robert Redford, he won the election, and he said, now what do I do? So the question is, we just had the protest, and so now what do we do? And how do we concretely implement these things that we want to change? That was the problem with Occupy Wall Street. It fizzled out. The riots and revolts in Egypt, where's that going? Just a brutal suppression.
Okay,
so as I said, it's a big question mark.
Other news points, I want to make sure we get to Sandusky.
Perfect.
Can we talk about Sandusky? What's going on at Penn State?
Right.
Jopo.
Right. I mean, there's not a lot to say about it. I mean, it's a terrible situation that I think is endemic in our culture today, where we have people. It's called a cover-up. The cover-up and obfuscation and lack of candor. A few examples of this recently would be Sandusky. Herman Cain, I would put him on the list, an individual who cannot answer a question candidly, yet wants to be president of the United States. How absurd. Instead of laughing him off the stage and saying, sir, you're not even ready for prime time, you can't answer a question. He called a press conference and then didn't answer any questions. And the other one I would put on is Bashar al-Assad in Syria. He's the champion when he was being interviewed, and they asked him, these people are dying in the street. what are you doing about it? And he said, I don't know anything about it, but you're the leader of Syria. So what we have is cover-ups. And people like Sandusky is the same idea, and Joppa. These people know about things, but they don't do anything about it. They cover it up. They're not candid. They're not truthful. And isn't it terrible that we live in a society where this kind of stuff can go on for years and years and years, and nobody does anything about it, and it deals with children, for example.
Well, the Sandusky case opened the door for the Syracuse, the individuals coming out of Syracuse. Do you expect that we will see more of these kinds of cases?
I think that we're going to see them because they're out there. The question is, what will responsible people do? You have this Bernie Fine case in Syracuse. You have Sandusky in Penn State and Joppa. Joppa was covering up the whole time for the athletics department. Anytime somebody came to him, there was an article in one of the papers about the disciplinary officer at Penn State came to him repeatedly and said, there are infractions by the players. They should not be able to play. And he said, I'm the one that's bringing the money into this university. They're going to play. She said this player shouldn't suit up. He was involved in some sort of a fight. So, and Joppa said, I'm bringing the money into the university, and he's going to play. Well, if he's got the leverage and he's got the power, then the people that are trying to eliminate these abuses, and the hazing incident also, with in a band, I mean, this type of stuff has to stop. It's ridiculous. And the people that can stop it are responsible people that should not bury their heads in the sand and not look the other way. You can't look the other way if you have hazing in a band among clarinet players. I mean, what kind of world is this? If you read it, you think it's funny, but it's not funny. This poor kid was killed, and he died, and it's just a darn shame. And this is in a university. It's not in the middle of Tahrir Square. It's not in the middle of the military. It's in the middle of the United States in a university, for God's sakes. I think they've got to go back to page one and start figuring out what it is they're supposed to be doing, and obviously they're not doing the right thing.
Do you think it's because these are football schools, that this is where they make their money? There's specific people in the athletic realm at these institutions that command what happens. The fact that Joppa had a little bit more power than even the president of the university is a little surprising and takes people aback, which is why the board tried to regulate power.
Right. Well, I agree with you, but I think it's a society-wide problem. We had the same problem with Wall Street, with the hedge funds, the same thing. It's all cover-up, and it's all lack of candor, and it's getting away with things. That's the culture that we live in today. If I can get away with it, then it's okay. That is not what we should be teaching our young people, our students. We should be teaching them responsibility and morality. You know, I had a student the other day somewhere that I'm teaching was making the comment, well, insider trading, you know, people get away with it. So why is it illegal? What's that? But it's illegal because it's a wrong thing to do. But the attitude in society is, if I can make a quick dollar, and that's the whole point. Joppa is just an example. He's just an example of the way in which we think, where we give power to someone like that, and we don't give emphasis to the academic side of the universities. It's the person who controls the money. And, you know, we are a capitalist society, after all. It's not a socialist country. It's not a communist country. On the other hand, I think it's gotten a little out of hand. And I think that this Occupy Wall Street thing, as fizzled out as it was, hit a nerve in society where people started thinking, well, wait a minute, maybe they have something of a point where, you know, this Wall Street mentality or culture, and it permeates everything. So he was the one that called the shots, as you said. He had more power than the board and the president to tell them what to do because he was bringing the dollars in. So I don't think it's football per se. Football's just a very egregious example of the way way we think, and we all think like that. And we shouldn't think like that, especially in a case like Sandusky, where it deals with children. That is so beyond the pale that they should have said, stop what we're doing. We've got to go back to square one and figure out what in the world we're doing around here. We're in a university, for God's sakes. And so they didn't do that. The thing degenerated, cover up over cover up over cover up, and now suddenly the thing bursts out. But years have gone by. These children are completely traumatized. Families are destroyed, all because of the almighty dollar. It's a shame.
It's a shame, but moving on, I want to hit all our topics.
Perfect.
Can we discuss the American troop withdrawal from Iraq that happened this past weekend?
Well, I mean, the troops are out, and now we have another question mark, just like we said before. We don't know what's going to happen, but likely the situation will degenerate. And the key chess piece over there is Iran. Iran and the internal dispute in Iraq between Shias and Sunnis and Kurdistan. Turkey is also involved.
This morning I was just hearing that the current president, there's problems with the Kurds, the Shiites, the Sunnis, like a lot is going on over there. The government, there's call for a new a more parliamentary in tune government. What's next for Iraq?
Well, the problem with parliaments, and this is the same thing I mentioned before about Egypt and Syria, the question is, does the political culture of the society allow itself to create a democracy? This is exactly the problem the founding fathers had in America. How do you can't, it's not so simple just to create a parliament, have people sit there and do representative. It has to be democracy, freedom, real representation. But the problem that they have in these sectarian countries is that the groups are fighting with each other, immortal battles for control, which are religious in nature. So when you have religious disputes, you know, it's sort of like what Roger Williams said, that, you know, religious disputes on a good day creates hypocrisy. This is Roger Williams of our history, the founder of Rhode Island. But on a bad day, religious disputes cause rivers of blood. And we see you cannot have religious disputes and have a democracy. That's why we have separation of church and state in our society. And it helps because when you start fighting religious disputes, nobody can see eye to eye because there's no, it's sort of that don't talk about religion and politics, they always say, because it's always going to get you in trouble. That's the problem in Iraq. But the other player is the Shiite regime of Iran, which is the world's great mischief maker, the one that has nuclear weapons aimed at Israel, the one that has terrorists funding around the world. That Iran wants to take over Iraq, and they had a war with Iraq. And now they're going to have an opportunity. So it's not so simple to just pull the troops out. It's good that we're pulling the troops out because we're going to have less casualties of our young people being killed over there. But on the other hand, the question is, where do we go from here? Because if the situation degenerates again, who knows?
I have to take us to another front, North Korea. Can you sum up North as we go into the Christmas holiday? It's the end of the year.
Right.
The dictator is now dead. His son is set to take his, is being groomed to take his position.
Well, Kim Jong-il, the dear leader, interestingly enough, was a collector of DVDs. He was an expert on American movies. He had the biggest collection in the world. He was a movie expert because he put on tremendous shows. Apparently somebody was sitting with him once. He put on these big spectacles and pageants. And they asked him about it. He knew every movie. His son, the successor, Kim Jong-un, was sent to Switzerland to be educated.
Okay.
So, but the intelligence people don't know a lot about him because he's a very young guy. So very few people have had a connection. But the thing that he has is that he's in the direct bloodline of Kim Il-sung, who was the founder of the republic. So he has that aura. Now, they've gone through a succession crisis before when Kim Jong-il took power from Kim Il-sung. The problem with Korea is the vast majority of the people are starving to death because the regime puts all its money into military expenditures. The other problem is North Korea has nuclear weapons and it sells nuclear technology to countries around the world. So the situation is very dangerous, but we're lucky that China is sitting there, which has influence on Korea to try to calm that situation down, because in the interim, in these societies, when you have transition, you have infighting, because you don't have a democratic country, so the infighting is between the military leaders and the political leaders jockeying for control. Now, if Kim Jong-un has this extra magical aspect that he has the blood of the leader, so he will likely come out as a successor, and apparently he has been there at the lying in state of his father, greeting the leaders. The thing that I want to mention is the fact that they have people crying in the streets for this guy, thousands of people standing on the streets, crying for hours. I'm just befuddled by it. Are they really crying? Or do they go home afterwards and start laughing? I don't know what they're doing. But in Russia, when people were growing up in Russian communism, they used to hear about Marx and Engels and Lenin and go home and laugh about it. So I don't know what's going on there. But the thing is, hopefully, it will stabilize.